Hi everyone, it's noon, so I guess we'll get started. So I'm going to start with a brief introduction. I'll start with myself. So I'm Amelia Regan. I'm the director of the Master Supply Chain Transportation and Logistics program here at the University of Washington, Seattle. And I've been working in transportation and logistics since 1986, although interested much longer than that. So I started a one-year internship at UPS in my final year of studying systems engineering at the University of Pennsylvania. And I was in the operations research group with UPS for a few years, building the first generation of routing and scheduling systems. And then I became an academic. I did the PhD at the University of Texas, and then I was in computer science and transportation engineering at the University of California, Irvine for 25 years before I joined the SCTL program here at the University of Washington. And logistics and transportation also are my passions. I'll introduce Todd next. So Todd Matsubara has more than 15 years of supply chain management experience. He's currently the procurement manager for Modern Animal, an industry disruptive veterinary clinic chain, and he was previously a supply chain manager or director for several health and wellness related brands. Prior to that, he worked on both product development and distribution in the automotive industry. Oh, and he received a PhD in transportation science from the University of California, Irvine in 2022. So that's how Todd and I overlap there. And Joe Chow, thank you so much for joining, Joe. Joe has more than 20 years of experience, 22 in fact, I looked it up, in transportation and logistics consulting and research. I don't know where the time went. After earning undergrad and master's degrees from Cornell University, he had a solid consulting career in the New York area before earning a PhD in transportation engineering from the University of California, Irvine, I think 2010. And is that right? Yeah, and he has had a stellar academic career over the last 13 years, and now he's an Institute Associate Professor at New York University. And we're just going to have a conversation, right? We're going to have a conversation about some key technology skills in supply chain management and logistics. And I think of these mainly, I sort of made a list and sent it out, but data analytics, AI, machine learning, optimization, sensors, sensor networks. Some people still call them the Internet of Things, IoT, cybersecurity, and I'm linking that with cloud computing. I don't know if they're separate or if they're linked. Robotics, obviously big, moving quickly, part of the field. Certainly supply chain analytics software is a skill set. And then I threw in, even though it's gotten a lot of bad press, distributed ledger technologies, which we used to call blockchain. And those are the mains. And then, of course, there's skills in data analysis, probably in R, Python programming skills that can be used for all sorts of things. And then, the emerging generative AI. But I wonder, what do each of you see as key skills? Joe, do you mind starting?
Yeah, sure, Amelia. Thanks for inviting me to this session. Yeah, I'm happy to share some thoughts about these technologies. Definitely there's been we've been seeing at least, so my perspective here actually more on the education side, I guess, and seeing how these emerging technologies are really impacting our research and also impacting the education side as well. So we're seeing more demand for robotics and AI in our education, in data sciences as well. Right, there's a lot more demand for those areas, to the extent where students that might traditionally enroll in our like transportation programs, they might now kind of want to focus more on more general topics. So that's something to kind of pay attention to, I think, that this where people might want to build broader skills in these emerging technologies, but at the same time that there might be a trade-off in where there's less focus and specialization in the domain areas. So something to kind of pay attention to, I guess. But as far as research-wise, we also have a lot of work with these various technologies. We've done studies with automated vehicles, with machine learning technologies. We recently had a study making use of natural language processing, which I guess has precursor to like the ChatGPT kind of methodologies, and using that to interface with Wikipedia to be able to classify cities at a very grand scale across across the globe using Wikipedia data. Yeah, looking at other technology. So I think it's kind of breaks down to like mobility technologies that we're seeing, and also methodologies in the optimization, statistics, the machine learning areas. So those are kind of like the breakdowns that we're seeing a lot of this growth in. So it's quite rapid, and sometimes it makes me feel like I'm already getting a little old, and it's, you know, it's some of this is like the students are driving the work, so it's nice to be able to work with students on that. So I'll stop there for now and see.
And Todd, you've been working out in the field. What do you see as the most important skills or emerging skills?
Yeah, that's very interesting. And Joe actually touched on, you know, a very important part where technology is changing so quickly that even industry can't keep up. Because you know, the things he's speaking about are really the infrastructure or the, but to actually implement that at the actual, you know, it's pretty difficult, because you need a system in place. SAP, NetSuite, they're all trying to race to keep up with these things and integrate them. Integration's key. Everything's moving from Bluetooth to the cloud to connected networks, IoT, all these different paths of information flowing around. Very difficult and very expensive to stop midstream, you know, an actual operation or a company to implement. That's what I've seen, is where a lot of companies are kind of stunted and stuck with what they have to work with as far as information or their systems. It's difficult for them to adapt new technologies, even though it would be much better for them. But that's actually at the operational level. And then you also have, as Joe spoke about, the analytics level, where there's still a lot of forecasting and you know, data analytics going on, a lot more improved AI to manage that, especially on the larger scales. A lot of companies are, like Amazon especially, very much at the forefront of that. Yeah, technology is moving very, very quickly, and actual applications are very difficult to implement.
Yeah, so Joe, I totally agree with the statement that you made, that if students are getting more general education, then they're giving up the domain knowledge. They're giving up the deep dive into supply chain systems, and you know, there's topics that you would examine in, say, a program like the one we have, that you would miss out on in a data science program. But and I think we're making trade-offs as people working in the field. I think certainly, Todd, you sort of touched on that. We can't know everything all the time. And if you make a decision to learn a new system, or implement a new system, or implement new paradigms, then it takes time. And it's a trade-off from the other new things that are coming out on the horizon. I'm going to make a statement. I want to see what you think about it. So, from my experience, most logistics operations are founded on common sense, with data analytics and optimization sort of adding to the, you know, efficiency of operation. And you say, from your own observation, about either public agencies, how they run the logistics operations, or companies, how they run their logistics operations, sort of working out in the field. Is that still the case?
Yeah, I think that's definitely still very much the case, and it's just like now there's more tools available. So definitely a big part of it is the training of the staff, and that's I think when you look at it between the public agencies versus the private companies, there's a big gap there, where public agencies tend to struggle much more to try to get well-trained staff to really be able to make use of a lot of these emerging techniques as opposed to private sector. So yeah, I think there's definitely given the fast rate of change of all the technologies, I think there's more and more because of that. I think that's probably related to seeing all these turnovers as people are kind of finding better matches over time to what types of roles they really want to do. Similarly, with the companies and agencies kind of realizing they have different needs or emerging needs driven by these emerging technologies. So.
Yeah, actually, that's interesting because I don't know how they found me. It's Regan County in Virginia. This pretty affluent county there. They contacted me just out of the blue, started asking questions, and they're trying to implement more modern technologies or contemporary ideas for supply chain, their public transit system. Because they're kind of, they're like you said, they're doing their same thing they're doing all the time. They can't really adapt to things. They just wanted just a completely different perspective of how to approach problem with volumes or demand. So it was very interesting that they wanted to just go outside the box and look at it, just to have something to think.
So there was a question, there was a comment from the, let's see if I can find it. Chat. There was a question from, or a comment from Sean. So Sean says that his work experience in supply chain shows companies use low-cost ERP solutions, which, and I'm paraphrasing what you said, but almost by definition, end up with outdated software and multiple and separate applications that don't communicate. I think that's, Todd, I think you were hinting at that in the beginning. And then, okay, the question goes on is, and I was going to actually ask this sort of question next. If students or people who are working in supply chains want to learn about emerging systems, how do you think, Todd, maybe you can address this, and then Joe and I can give from an academic perspective, how would they do that? How would they keep up with what's going on technology?
Yeah, I think as far as technology, you really just have to get out there and jump in and understand, like, what are the needs out there? What are the problems out there? What are the needs out there? And this question was exactly, it hit it right in the head. There's a lot of outdated systems, a lot of systems that talk to each other properly. You have maybe your warehouse management system or your logistics system running things, but it doesn't communicate with the accounting department, the finance department. Maybe you have some outside entities or stakeholders that need information exchange back and forth. But as always with any supply chain, the backbone is a good flow of information up and down the supply chain, both directions. And it's not happening just because, as we said, the speed of things evolving. I honestly think the future is going to have to be some kind of cloud-based solution or software as a service solution that can adapt very quickly, but also take the old version of itself and keep updating it, but also be very adaptable to anything out there. And I think there will be a need for a very long time for people who are able to integrate those different pieces together for all these companies that are out there for quite some time.
So Joe, Sean's question is what kind of training should somebody who's working in supply chain now do to prepare for the future?
Yeah, so in that question, he raises like whether there should be more training in software engineering or maybe going for an MBA. I think it's probably somewhere. It might not necessarily be either one of those. I feel software engineering itself, it might not cover the specific problems to the supply chain industry that you encounter, and so because of that, they'll get that, with the software engineering, they'll have very advanced skills, but they may not be as relevant to the problems that they need to tackle these supply chain problems. And I think in the supply chain industry, the problems are very there's very particular structure to the kinds of problems that we deal with, right? And I think you really need to have some knowledge in those areas. As an example, I in my courses I do get students that come in from like a software or programming background, and sometimes they might get completely lost in some of the material I'm teaching involving optimization or mathematical programming, things like that, just because it's really out of their comfort zone. So I think what we're looking for is probably people, or at least programs that can offer something that's like a computer or computing oriented type of supply chain program that I think that can really give something that would be able to address these more modern needs. MBA, I feel like business school might not get into the thick of the technical components as much, and so I think there are programs, MBA programs that do have that, but just as like a general, in general, the MBA programs might not be as relevant in addressing these technical challenges. So.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think there's, we train engineers and we try to really get them to plan for the future in terms of lifelong learning, right? That's one of the things we do in engineering programs now. But all of us here in the room have been, are doing lifelong learning. We're living that kind of world, right? Where there's no standing still. I don't think that any one program will give you all the skills that you need. I think that you could study optimization and that would be useful. You could certainly study machine learning and that would be useful, and software engineering, and that is useful. I think that logistics professionals can learn a lot about the various tools through taking a few courses or going to Coursera courses or edX courses, some of the almost free courses online, and pick and choose. And, maybe spend 4 months focusing on one topic and then a few months, in the next year focusing on another topic. I don't mean all day, every day. I mean, sort of as an aside. And I think all of us are doing that ourselves as we go through our professional careers. And then learning things sort of as needed, depending on what the tools needed in your company. And then, of course, programs like ours, and there's many such programs, touch on sort of every aspect of logistics and supply chain management. And our program has a added focus on transportation systems. And of course, programs are bringing in technologies more and more, right? There's no way to build a program like this without continuously updating the kind of technologies we're teaching and the technologies that we're encouraging students. So I would say don't get overwhelmed and pick something. So maybe if you don't have strong Python skills, spend a few months learning Python skills, spend a few months learning R skills, spend a few months doing, basic machine learning tools online. I don't mean you have to be a machine learning expert. We're not creating new machine learning tools. Somebody's doing that, but we need to be consumers of these kinds of tools and users of these tools. And many of you will be managers of people who are actually building the systems that you're going to use in your companies, or improving the systems that you're going to use in your companies. And they may have software engineering skills, or optimization or machine learning skills. But as the manager, you don't have to be an expert. You just have to have a general idea of what's out there and how to use it.
Yeah, that's just it. I mean, if you have a broad understanding and at least pretty good knowledge of everything, you can manage it well and manage people who are very specific with the knowledge of things. That's the best spot you really want to be, as far as if you're in a middle management position like that, so you understand what's happening, right? You can guide everyone and be the conduit for, even oftentimes it's cross-functional teams, because everything I've run into is a lot of times an operations division of a company can't even communicate with the finance side because they just don't even speak the same language to each other. So just being very broad with everything, and being able to understand or understand at least you have some working knowledge of it. That'll go a long way for sure.
Are there any other questions from the audience that we could take?
Yeah.
So Joe, when you're, oh, go ahead, Joe. You want to say something?
I was going to add, yeah, just thinking about how like universities have responded. I think one thing was the point you brought up was about flexibility, adding more flexibility to the programs, offering like smaller slices, certificates, online options, things like that to allow people to also customize more. We've like within our programs, we've gone leaner in terms of required courses, and so that students really have more customization of how they want to select their curriculum to complete their programs. So I think that's also something that we're seeing more of. And again, I think that's a good thing, but there's also that potential for like I think there needs to be more also like guidance and from the I guess from our faculty advisors to talk with the students about what they want, and otherwise with the added customization of flexibility, they might just kind of get lost a little bit in terms of what they want to take. So
yeah, I think it's important to add options for students who come into a master's program, many different kinds of master's programs, for example, to fill in the gaps in their own knowledge so that they feel confident. So for example, some students would take extra programming courses or extra statistical analysis, data science courses, even in a transportation or logistics program, so that they can, again, feel more confident in their broader technical skills, or students who haven't studied economics might take a transportation economics course or some other economics courses in order to broaden their understanding of economics generally. So I think that adding some flexibility in programs, all sorts of programs, can be very beneficial to students coming from different backgrounds. And I assume that those of you in the audience come from very different backgrounds, right? So some of you come from, who are working in logistics, come from business backgrounds, some come from industrial or civil or mechanical engineering backgrounds. Some students, I just talked to a guy who's probably going to join our program who has exceptionally good training already in economics and an MBA who wants to learn more about the nuts and bolts and supply chains. And then those of you who know the nuts and bolts and supply chains will be probably more interested in filling in gaps in specific technologies such as, you know, statistical analysis, data science, and machine learning. So if you were talking to potential undergraduates who say, you know, my passion is wherever they come from, my passion is logistics and supply chain management, would you tell them to, you know, work for a few years and then consider a graduate program, or would you tell them to go straight away? Joe, I know you went straight away. Did you find that especially beneficial?
yeah, I mean, so I went straight away for like a master's, and then I worked a few years, and I found that actually very helpful, just because an undergraduate in civil engineering in particular tends to be very broad. Like they cover a lot of different bases in structures, environmental, and so on and so forth. So it's really laying the foundation. And even just 1 year of grad school for me, it felt like just a complete reinvention in terms of the amount of material I learned, and it's just so much more comprehensive, like new knowledge that I gained kind of like an engineering systems type of material. But I mean, I generally try to advise undergraduate students to also consider working for a few years, just to get that experience, and also that really helps give them the motivation, so they know when they're going to grad school, whether or not that's, you know, like why they're there, right? So they're more motivated, and it also helps in terms of their studies. I think they have more work time management, and that helps them during the studies as well. So I think I find that really helpful. And if they decide later on that it's, you know, they can always go back to school later if they want to go into grad school.
Yeah, Todd, I know that was your experience, right? You worked for many years before all those years in school.
Yeah, I did. I worked for quite a bit of time and went back to school. And it was interesting because I didn't really relate well to school, I guess, the first time when I went. You know, I gave it a try, and then, you know, I worked, promised myself I'd go back. I went back, and I loved it so much. It was amazing. I had focus, you know, I had direction. I knew what I wanted out of it. You could just bring so much more table. Like Joe said, you have something, you know what you want, right? You have a better idea at that point. You know who drives you. There is some benefit to working and then coming back if that's the case, but you know, every person's different and their situations are different.
Yeah, I mean, now there's so many educational options, right? So, you know, there's so many programs that can be done online, which is convenient to people who keep working. I did my first master's degree in applied math when I was working for UPS because I needed, you know, the skills I was learning really in operations research classes, I was applying at my job. You know, I was learning as I was going. I had an engineering degree, but not a lot of statistical background. So taking some statistics and stochastic processes class really improved my understanding. Again, I was learning about queuing theory and then applying queuing theory models to improve the efficiency of UPS's operations. And it became much more meaningful to me after a few years of work experience to, you know, be able to learn things, identify the things that I wanted to learn that would help me immediately in my work.
Well, one of the topics you brought up in your list, I wanted to discuss about was the blockchain. So one area that I've been interested in was is looking at like data privacy, and at least with public agencies, there's a lot of interest because they're working more and more with private companies. So I wanted to get your takes on the use of like blockchain technologies in supply chain field, and whether or not that's something that it's being used more and more by supply chain providers to just make use of data. Is that something that can is it just for transactions? Is it something that we can make use of in securing data sharing and such?
Well, so I think it's still very much on the horizon in supply chains. People talk a lot about blockchain and distributed ledger technologies generally. We examined privacy preserving communication systems for people who are interacting with a public transport, right? Specifically for paratransit users, right? So paratransit users need data privacy. By law, they need data privacy. And so we were examining using blockchain. We found that blockchain itself seemed to be a little heavy-handed in terms of the use, that there are probably some, I'll use the term lighter weight, secure communications systems that can be implemented. And I think that eventually that public agencies will be implementing these. I mean, I think eventually we're going to have a lot more security for our data generally, because as you know, we don't have any. We have very little. Most of us don't pay enough attention to what happens to our data. So there's a few cybersecurity experts out there who probably do, but the rest of us kind of live our lives on a hope and a prayer that nothing bad's going to happen with our data.
There was just a new Black Mirror episode talking about just that, how this is like a science fiction TV show on Netflix, where they talk about the possibility that even in real time, because of your data being made public practically, like, you know, it's when it's made available or through these companies, it can be yeah, it's very easy to take advantage of that. It's quite scary.
So that brings in an interesting issue. So people working in logistics and supply chain, if you were going to pick, like we're sort of talking about these various skills that you could learn. Well, if you wanted to spend a year focusing on developing general cybersecurity skills, and that's easy to do that, right? There's lots of great programs. University of Arizona has a really good program. Gosh, they're kind of all over the place. Our university probably has a program you can do online in cybersecurity, but if you become a cybersecurity expert inside a supply chain organization, you're going to be invaluable. I mean, those other skills in machine learning and data analytics, of course, those are important as well.
Right.
In software integration, those are lots of important, but if you wanted to focus on one topic that might really make you invaluable to your current organization and to many others, it would be cybersecurity.
But do you think it's worthwhile to try, like, to pivot, or is there a certain threshold where it makes sense that, like, for someone to consider that, or like if you know the whole career up to now has been focused on something else, and then but it's kind of similar to cybersecurity, and something, you know, that they might want to consider is to, like, you know, build up some more coursework in that, and or build up some more knowledge in that, and then pivot their position as becoming more of a cybersecurity expert. But there's like a risk too, right, for them to kind of to pursue that path from where they currently are.
I think people should focus their attentions where they're most interested, right? And that that's one possibility. So if you were, and I do think that logistics operations don't have enough cybersecurity experts. They especially don't have enough cybersecurity experts who understand supply chains. Todd, you're nodding. So what's your experience, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, you hit it on the head. They don't even think about it. There's just zero thought of that more often than not. Just and they don't even give it a passing thought every day. It's pretty scary that a lot of how open these things are, and they really should focus on that a lot more.
I mean, I certainly think the large companies are doing that, are focusing. So anybody in the audience who's interested in this kind of thing, I would talk to some experts in cybersecurity and ask that question Joe asked. Are there some specific skills I can learn without doing a huge deep dive? Are there some specific skills I can learn that would be useful to me as a supply chain professional? Or do I need to do a deep dive? And I don't know the answer to that. I can tell you one person asked me, I mean, I haven't asked her for permission, but so Harthy is at the University of Arizona. She's a cybersecurity expert with some supply chain transportation management experience. She did her PhD with me, but really her interest is in cybersecurity, and that's what she teaches. And it might be useful to ask her, if anybody in the audience is interested in that, about how deep a dive. We should have invited her actually today to cover that angle, but it would have been too many Irvine people.
Yeah, and that backs into, like, you know, what we discussed earlier is a lot of the systems that are in place that the companies are using. I mean, they can't change to something else, so they're not even able to increase their data security. They're just kind of stuck where they are. A huge step to change to, you know, another system or another that would benefit. So I think there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, I mean yeah. So your comment there, Todd, has me thinking about the MTA. So MTA is the transit agency in New York. and it's really huge, right? So it's quite costly for them to consider changes in terms of like software and technologies. But one thing that they're trying out these days, they have these transit tech labs where they use that as a mechanism to engage with smaller companies. So they'll host these like competitions or just soliciting proposals on different ideas, right? And try to get smaller companies to respond to those. And I think that seems like an interesting way for them to kind of try out new technologies without having to fully invest in that right away, and see how that works. Right. So I think at least a lot of public agencies now are doing more of that kind of piloting technologies, given the rapid change in these technologies we're seeing. So it's promising, I think.
So I wonder, so we were working with public agencies who were piloting technologies to connect TNC drivers, TNC companies to paratransit, right? Because there's some paratransit trips that can be served well by a car and not need a van and can be served much more efficiently. And there were pilots all across the country that most of them started pre-COVID. And it seems like most of them have sort of evaporated. So is there a danger that public agencies who are trying to adopt technologies will pilot them, but then not adopt them? And why don't they work? Why don't they? So Joe, you're more your thumb is on the pulse of the largest public agency, transit agency in the country.
Yeah. Well, so I think in the case with like TNCs in particular, that they've already been facing high costs with their operations. And so COVID being the disruption, it had high consequences. But I think in general with pilots, that there has been pickup from back from COVID. So like as an example, in the city of Arlington, Texas, they're operating autonomous shuttles, and they started that in 2021. So post-COVID, they started that, and it's running, and it's quite successful. So I think it's really it depends on the specific agency, but there are a number of success stories with piloting like ride sharing, with piloting automated vehicle technologies that I think researchers at least are building on that. So and now there's a lot of talk about like drone deliveries, robotic deliveries, and different like cargo bike technologies for urban deliveries and last mile. So I think that there's a lot of potential for that, and definitely the public agencies are very interested in that. Like New York City is very interested. So,
and I would assume that companies like UPS, Amazon, FedEx are also engaging in those kinds of.
oh, definitely, yeah. As far as I'm aware, yeah, they have their programs for testing out these different operations.
Well, we're sort of coming to the end of our time because we usually stop at 12:45. But I wonder, well, first of all, I want to thank you, both of you, for attending and participating and bringing Todd your many, many years of work experience. So Todd sort of had all this work experience and managed to somehow get a PhD at the same time. That's kind of crazy. And Joe, with many years
very helpful. Yes.
What'd you say, Todd?
You were very helpful with that. I
Oh, no, I don't take any credit. I don't take any credit. But and then Joe, with your really solid work experience and academic experience, it seems like we're at a pivotal point finally for technologies in transportation and logistics. Of course, we've been saying that for 30 years, and we've been adopting technologies, right? We have been adopting technologies in these industries for 30 years. Yep. It does seem like there is going to be an increase, that we're having an increase in adoption. And I have this theory that I'm trying to talk a lot about. And I think that companies, because we're having a small recession, right? A small recession in the logistics industry. not in the economy as a whole, but in our industries specifically,
Mhm.
I think it's a time to pause and to regroup and to implement new software systems, to implement new technology skills, to re-optimize operations. And I'm hoping that we'll see an increase in those kind of activities. And I think public agencies as well. When I think about logistics systems, I think about transit agencies, as well as private companies, that this should be an opportunity to take advantage of the pause or take advantage of the quiet to make things more efficient. Do you guys see any of that happening, or do you agree?
I think that is something that they want to do, but also because the rate at which things are changing so fast, it's also hard to do that. But I think that is something that agencies are interested in, kind of like pausing, reassessing, especially with after COVID, the way things kind of shifted gear so much. Like a lot of previous data became obsolete, and then now it's kind of having to rebuild, and so there's an opportunity there for agencies to look at things differently, I think.
Todd, how about you? Any last thoughts or thoughts about this?
No, I mean, I agree. I mean, I'm fully, I agree with what you said and what Jill said. I mean, there's not much more I can add. Yeah.
Okay, well, it'll be one last chance to see if we have any additional questions from the audience before we take off. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming today. We really appreciate having a chance to have this discussion. Joe and Todd, I really appreciate your participation. Katie, who manages things, I really we couldn't do any of this stuff without your help. So thanks very much for that. I guess we'll just sign off. But thanks a lot, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for writing.